have a wonderful success story here for you today on Inspired Coach Podcast. And I know that you are going to find this guest potentially inspiring, edgy, igniting, and many other potential feelings all rolled into one. What I do know and can tell you about her, that she is a complete delight and a highly successful award-winning coach of ours here at the Beautiful You Coaching Academy. Her name is Eleanor Hadley. Let me tell you more about her. Eleanor Hadley is a certified sex educator, speaker and writer based on the Gold Coast, Australia. As an award-winning sex and relationship coach, she shares entertaining and practical sex education through a variety of courses and is renowned for her embodied lap dance teachings. Eleanor counts large brands such as Adore Beauty, Lovehoney and Frenchie as her clients, and as a regular featured writer for national publications, she is known for her informative yet cheeky and relatable style. Eleanor also hosts the popular award-winning podcast Sex Etc., where she shares tangible tips on how to prioritise your pleasure, enhance your sex life, and elevate your relationships. So we are here today to talk not just about Eleanor's incredible success as a coach, but also sex, pleasure, censorship, and a whole range of other things in between. Eleanor is our current relationships coach of the decade, and the work that she is doing is so inspiring. She's running an incredibly successful business, and in this interview, she shares the one big thing that she believes has most assisted her to grow her business. It might come as a surprise to you, then again, it might not. It's certainly one that has been mentioned from successful coaches here on the podcast before. And Eleanor also has some interesting insights and experiences to share about censorship in her work. She's clearly talking about things that, even though we necessarily shouldn't, some sectors of society find very edgy and risky and even taboo, even though sex in our sex lives is a natural, normal, healthy aspect of all of us as human beings. And so Eleanor has experienced more than her fair share of censorship in her business, particularly on social media platforms. And it's really inspiring to hear her talk about these things and how she's used them as fuel rather than anything that instills fear in her. She's a wonderful coach. She's a gorgeous person doing brilliant, needed, and incredible work. I hope that you love this success story ahead with Eleanor Hadley. Eleanor Hadley, you're on Inspired Coach Podcast. Welcome to you.
Thank you so much for having me. It's a pleasure to be here.
Well, pleasure is going to be one of the things we're going to talk about today. So it's
Absolutely.
Not just a pleasure to have you here, but that is going to make up part of this conversation because it is such a vital part of what it is that you now do as an extraordinarily successful coach and certified sex educator. But let's go back to almost the beginning. Not the beginning of life for you, but the beginning of your business life and coaching dream. Tell us, Eleanor, what is it that you were doing when you first thought to yourself, gosh, I think I might like to train to become a coach and or start my own business?
Yeah, this is such a great question and it really takes me back. So I actually already owned my own business prior to becoming a coach and starting this business that I'm currently running. So I ran a pole dancing studio down in Melbourne for 4 years before I became a coach. And it was in this transition period after I sold that studio, I knew that I wanted to start my own business, and it was all about sensual movement and sensuality. Back then I wasn't talking about sexuality at all, much sensuality only. And I started teaching some classes in Melbourne and started speaking on Instagram more about my thoughts on sensuality and femininity and feminism and things like this. And I had someone who is actually an alumni of Beautiful You, and she was following my journey, and I had known her from a previous life back when I used to work in international community development. And she suggested to me one day, Eleanor, I think you'd make a really great coach. Have you heard of Beautiful You? And that was how my journey began. I was like, oh, actually, that sounds like a great idea. I'd love to be able to work with people one-on-one. I'd love to be able to share more tangibly what I'm really, really passionate about. And so I had a look into it, and it was an immediate yes. I jumped on the website, and here I am.
Here you are. Many years later now, an award-winning coach. Your podcast is award-winning. Your work is award-winning. You have just this year been announced as our relationships coach of the decade for your extraordinary work, which I want to dive into, even further. But tell us about the shift from... Okay, now I feel like I want to go back even further than that, okay? I don't do this with everyone that I interview on the podcast, but I feel like I'd like to ask you, especially now knowing that you owned a pole dancing studio before you moved into this work. And of course, we know that even though it's not necessarily always a direct line, and it shouldn't always be a direct line, for some folks there is a connection between pole dancing and sexuality. And I'd love to ask you, did you grow up in a very sex positive household? Is that something that was a part of life for you from when you were a little one? Or is this an area of life that has just developed as a passion of yours?
This is such a question. I don't think that I would call my house necessarily sex positive or sex negative. It was sort of like sex neutral. I think that a lot of the time sex is just a topic that is like not really spoken about. There wasn't like overt shame around the topic, but it wasn't openly discussed. And so I didn't sort of grow up in this wildly sex positive environment that, oh, okay, I'm going to be sharing this. And in fact, I was quite adamant at this that I was a sensuality coach, and I was really specific at the time. Sensuality is different from sexuality, and here's how it's different. And sensual movement is different from being like sexy and sensual. And that was my own stuff that I had to kind of peel back and question my conditioning around, why I was so hesitant to even in the same vicinity as the world of sexuality to be seen talking about something sexual. And it got to a point where I stopped caring as much about what other people would think and how it would be perceived. And I followed my interest. I was really, really deeply interested in it, but I hadn't yet had the opportunity to fully explore the sexuality side of the work that I was doing. And then I eventually gave myself permission, did a bunch of self-study after working with Biker, and then eventually did my own study in somatic sex coaching as well, just to sort of, add to my qualifications. But the history was not necessarily sex positive and like really, really open. It was a journey, an unfolding, if you will.
And you know what? I have been witness to that journey and unfolding. And it's been so interesting and so beautiful to see, because we can never ever know what it is that's going on for someone really when we see them online in places like social media. But I remember seeing you when you were first coaching in the area of embodiment and sensuality, and that felt, I was like, ooh, that's edgy. That's risky, but then slowly over time, things have become more edgy and more risky. And I know that you have felt the impacts of that, not necessarily always in great ways, which I think is an important thing for us to talk about. But it has been such a brave journey to see you go on. And it makes me want to ask you now, do you think there's more risk and more edginess to come? Or are you at the limit, do you think?
That's such an interesting reflection, Julie, because I think at the start, I felt the same. I thought what I was doing was a little bit edgy, talking about sensuality, even being a pole dancer. I hid that from certain people for quite a while before I eventually just sort of came out as a pole dancer and then came out as a sensuality coach, and it's all sort of blossomed. And I think that what happens is that your comfort zone continues to expand and open up and widen. And so now it's interesting to hear that reflection that okay, my work is now being perceived as even edgier because I've just become so deeply comfortable with it, Julie, that I'm this is so natural to talk about. And I have to remind myself, keep that beginner's mind that a lot of the things that I speak so openly about in terms of sexuality are really edgy and scary and a lot for some people because they're brand new to this journey to even accepting their sexuality, that they're sexual beings. And so I don't know that I'm at my limit. I have certain realms that aren't of interest to me personally in my work, but I think that I'm going to continue just speaking openly and sharing all about sex and pleasure because I'm so deeply passionate about it. But who knows what the limit is? I don't know.
Well, this is true. I mean, who knows what that is, and you are right. I love that you mentioned that you understand that it is important to keep a beginner's mind around some of the things that you talk about. Because, for example, not everyone is necessarily comfortable talking openly about oral sex or openly about the fact that, they can learn how to give their partner a lap dance. The thought of that to them, a private lap dance, the thought of that to them is, for a lot of people, is edgy.
Yeah,
It is absolutely edgy, but it's also many of the things, all of the things, in fact, that you talk about are a beautiful, expressive, natural, healthy, amazing part of life. And so we need bold, risky people such as yourself to talk about these things so that things become less edgy and less risky and we experiment and play more.
Totally. And I think that a really huge goal for me in the work that I do is to be that safe place people to explore their pleasure and to learn about sex, because there's not a lot of places where people can do that. The sex ed system really failed most of us, and a lot of us are just living our lives with lackluster intimacy and maybe feeling like there's something wrong or broken about us and our sexuality, but not realizing that what you're going through might be really common. And so I want to create this space that people can feel safe to learn and understand and feel really seen. And so that's kind of my goal with the work that I do. And if I have to be, a little bit edgy and maybe push some people's buttons or just kind of make people squirm a little bit, I'm never going to push someone out of their comfort zone, but I'm going to invite them to expand theirs. And if they want to join me, then I'm here to create that space for them.
Spoken like a truly trauma-informed coach. Just want to slip that one in there. Beautiful. Now, Eleanor, as your work has expanded and you have, you're reaching a really large audience now, you're working with amazing brands and doing lots of speaking and, using social media to talk about so many different sex positive related topics. I know that one of the things that you've had to face is, well, I don't know whether you've faced any criticism, but if you've copped any flack, I'd love to hear about that because I think that's always important for us to talk about. But one of the things I know that you have faced is censorship. online with the things that you talk about. Tell us a little bit more about that and how you've managed that, because I know that there's a lot of people out there that have had instances where their Instagram account's gone down for one day, or something's happened to their social media platforms for a week and they've completely lost they've lost it. You know, it's just been the worst thing ever. And of course it is really upsetting when things like that happen, but you've had this happen multiple times deliberately from these platforms. Tell us more about that and how you've managed that for yourself.
This is a topic that I have a big smile on my face, but my blood is boiling just thinking about it, because it is such a frustrating mirror of the world in which we exist. And it really shows that the topics around, especially women's liberation, but sexuality in general, are so oppressed. And the algorithm really reflects that. The algorithm was created by certain people with certain moral values, and it has really used that to create the rules and regulations and the community guidelines. And so my experience as a sexuality educator, I have to be incredibly careful, same as all of the people in my industry. We have to be so careful to self-censor, and we can't use certain words. We have to put a little asterisk. You know, I can't say the word sex, even though that's what my work is about. Even libido or desire, pleasure, sometimes I have to censor out these words. And so, and especially when it comes to photographic content as well, you know, I don't feel as though I post anything that is, you know, too much, but by whose standards? The female body in particular seems to be villainized a little bit more than, you know, male presenting folks. And so I've had to deal with the self-censorship, and I have to deal with that on a daily basis. You know, every time I put up a post, I've got to scan it a few times, and I might have to go back into Canva and add an asterisk because I forgot one, and it gets in the way of your flow. And I've also had my account deleted before. Thankfully, I got it back after a couple of weeks, but that was a really scary thing, because losing your account is losing your business. And I was very proud of myself for staying relatively cool throughout those couple of weeks, and I had someone help me out to get it back. But, you know, it was a scary prospect to have all of the people that I had made these connections with, just suddenly I would have disappeared into the abyss. And you can ask people to go onto your email list all you want, and you can say, oh, I'll try a different platform because, you know, I'll like rage against the machine. But if everyone's already on Instagram, like, it's very, very difficult to go elsewhere, and to take your audience elsewhere. So it's a frustrating thing that we have to deal with, and I wish it wasn't this way, but yeah. Such is the world we live in.
Yeah, well, thank you for sharing that with us, because, you know, I think that's a really important part of your story and journey to tell, and I'm so glad I asked you about it, because so many new and emerging coaches that I talk to, the biggest censor that they're facing is themselves. You know, they are worried and self-censoring themselves all the time, worried about what they're saying. And here you are actually having to do that for the reasons that if you don't and you're not careful, your vitally important, healthy, you know, liberating work could see a sector of your business crash. And so, yeah, once again, brave, risky, edgy, not necessarily in ways that you might want to be, but you have to be. And clearly this work means so much to you that you're willing to do this. Your passion for it is a sign that you're willing to compromise. I don't know whether compromise is the right word, but willing to try and play the game a little bit to continue to get yourself out there.
Yeah, it's the price that unfortunately I have to pay. And I think that The censorship does is, not only makes my blood boil, it's this fuel to my fire, because the fact that my work gets censored and any talk about sexuality gets censored, it sort of proves the point that this is incredibly important. Because it's talk about this topic is taboo, sexual pleasure and intimacy, and those are topics that we don't want the general population to know about or speak about or hear about, and that's the problem. That's the problem, that we're not talking about these topics openly in society, and so there is so much oppression when it comes to sexuality, and that leads to trauma. If we're not speaking openly about pleasure and our right to pleasure, then there are so many awful things that can happen. There's so many ways that we keep ourselves small, so many ways that we don't access the depth of pleasure that our bodies are capable of. And it's just this way of keeping us small and locked away. And so it sucks that we have to sort of play the game within this sort of simulation of this platform. But I will do what I can to say what I need to say and get my message across within those confines, because it's so important, and it proves the point to me that it's so important.
It sure does. It sure does. That's an amazing way to put it. And to see it, and to, instead of letting it take you down, as you say, allow it to fuel your fire, which I love. Eleanor, I know that this is a really big question, but you are now running this incredibly national, international, thrivingly beautiful, successful business as a sex educator, a coach, a speaker, podcaster, presenter, so many different things. Tell us about some of the things that you believe have contributed to your business success. Big question.
Oh, what a beautiful question. I think that in terms of speaking, the first thing I can think of is when I was really, really into it. I'm not sure if you know this about me, Julie, but before I even had my first business in Pole, I studied international development at uni, and I was so interested in development. I was so interested in charities, NGO, aid organizations, and I volunteered all throughout. Year 11, I went to Guatemala for a few weeks by myself to test myself out to see if I really would field, which was such a bizarre thing to do. But I was like, yes, sign me up. I wanna do this work. And as a result, I ended up speaking at school assemblies, and I did a lot of public speaking around all the sort of charities that I'm hearing for. That public speaking experience really helped me to first just figure out how much I loved it, and to sort of hone that skill. It's something that I've carried out. Even when I was running the Pole studio, I was doing emceeing my Christmas showcase, and I just love speaking in front of an audience. And I think that was something that really contributed to what I do now.
Yeah. I'm not surprised to hear that, because I have never known there to be one business owner that has said, yeah, public speaking didn't work for me.
We just love it.
Getting in front of an audience, meeting people, being with people in person, sharing a positive message, helping to improve people's lives. Yeah, that didn't work. It's it's always going to work, in some way or another, no matter what type of message it is that you have to share. Yeah. Eleanor, I would also hedge bets, but you can correct me if I'm wrong, that building community and relationships with people and drawing people towards you that can do things like recommend you for speaking engagements, introduce you to brands that you collaborate with in the positive sexuality space, draw people towards you that are going to come along to your workshops or work with you with a deep understanding of the positive nature of what you do, rather than somebody just going, oh, well, that's just weird or wrong. And obviously you're not for everybody, none of us are, but talk to us about relationships and community, because, you know, the more that I go deeper and deeper into 2+ decades in this industry, the more that honestly I'm realizing relationships are just everything when it comes to a successful business.
Yeah, absolutely. That is so, so true. And here's where I am incredibly grateful for Instagram. The amount of people who I now count as friends now, who have introduced me to different people for different opportunities, who have invited me to speak at events, who have invited me onto podcasts, that have come from Instagram directly. Like that is how my business, because of the community that I've created on Instagram, people feel like they know me, they are really, really connected to my work, and so they know, okay, I've got an opportunity, I'm going to ask Eleanor. And it happens constantly, and it's so beautiful, because there could be people who have sidelines watching and consuming your work and being a fan of you for years, and then eventually they're like, hey, I've got this incredible opportunity. You know, I went on a podcast just last week with a massive community, and it was such a fun experience, and she's been watching my work for a couple of years and has taken a couple of my courses, and I had no idea until I got the email one day, would you like to come and join us? And so I think it's really, really beautiful to just sort of show up so authentically, and be yourself, and really engage with your community in the DMs too. Like the amount of incredible conversations that I have with people, and I think that people tend to open up when you're a coach. They open up a lot in the DMs, and you know, sometimes you got to set those boundaries. You can't be, you know, like in there constantly, but really just having these honest and authentic conversations. I think that people are quite safe speaking to me, especially about topics that other people would think is, you know, TMI. And it's just beautiful to cultivate that in the DMs, in comments, and Instagram has really helped me a lot there. So it's not all bad.
Well, that's a good thing to hear. And of course, it can't be all bad because you keep returning to it. And obviously, it's a platform for you that works really, really well. Just as, you know, I was only talking to a coach last week, and she's doing incredible things on LinkedIn. It is just
amazing.
Wildly great for her, but she also has a particular corporate bent to her world and work, and so that makes sense. We have to be where, you know, people are at, which is wonderful. Eleanor, as we come towards the close of our time, I would love to ask you for what your words of inspiration or advice might be for any coach out there that was thinking about, you know, going into a niche or an area of coaching that was edgy, let's say, in some way. Might not necessarily be about sexuality. It could be edgy in any particular way. What would your advice and tips for them be? Because I know that you're going to be such an inspiration to so many people. What would you have to share with them?
This is a really big one, because I know I struggled a little bit with really using my voice, because I was worried about what certain people would think. And so there's a couple different ways that you can go about this. You know, either you can just block the people that you don't want to see your business page and your work, and you just do your thing without them seeing, if you have people in your life that you know are just going to judge you. Or you can just allow yourself really be exactly who you are and go for it regardless of what other people say. Because if other people are trying to sort of bring you down or say that's too much, you're being too much, that's not okay, it's always just a projection. And there are going to be so many people whose lives you can have an incredible impact on being your authentic self and coming to this work with the things that you're passionate about speaking on. And I'd really encourage you to focus on that. Who can you help? Who can you have an impact on? And not who's like concerned about your work, concerned about how you're showing up, concerned about what you're doing. That's what's going to really, really just be authentic and be yourself. Don't stress too much about the people out there who don't get you, because like you said before, Julie, you're not going to be for everybody, and you don't have to be. Like and also you asked me before if I've had any any backlash or anything like that in my work. I really haven't. There's probably plenty of people out there who get the ick from my work, and that's fine. Probably plenty of people out there that are like, absolutely not, I'm not interested in learning anything about sex or pleasure from this person. And that is so fine, because I'm not going to show up and create content for people who don't want to learn from me. I'm here for the people that are here for me. So here I am.
That's it. And you know what? That is just such a beautiful, potent, powerful message, Eleanor, for all coaches at no matter what stage. We can't be for everybody, and that means that giving any level of focus to critics or people that overtly question us, not in good ways, but in, who are you, what are you doing sort of ways, is simply a waste of our time. It is taking you away from the people who want you, need you, and who you can serve. And so, Eleanor, I just want to say congratulations on all of your incredible success in your business. Your coaching journey and arc is one that I've seen right from the very beginning, and it has been a joy. I love edgy, risky out there, Eleanor, now, and where you are, and I'm excited to just even contemplate where you may go. And I hope the algorithm goes with you, girl. Like wherever it is that you desire to go in your, in your dream to support us to all live more sex positive and pleasure fueled lives.
Oh, well, thank you so much. That's so beautiful.
It's a pleasure. Thank you so much for being with us.